I'd like to introduce our panelists. Rachel Blackwood, a physical therapist with a doctorate in physical therapy, who has years of experience as a hospital-based outpatient and short-term care therapist, and Jane Sizemore, who has a master's in occupational therapy and is a senior home safety specialist, which is a certification for aging in place specialists. They are the co-authors of 365 Tips for Aging in Place. And now, Jane and Rachel, I turn it over to you.
As you know, we prepare for everything, right? And just as a rhetorical question, we have plans for if there's a tornado. We have plans for if there's a fire. My parents are in the process of planning their own funerals. We plan for all kinds of things, all kind of contingencies, all kind of things that might or might not happen, but we don't plan for aging. We just kind of take that as it comes, but there's not really a plan in place, and all of us are aging. So it's something that maybe we should plan for, and that's kind of like what I would like to talk about today. Jane and I would like to talk about today. How can you create a game plan for aging in place?
So the reason we want to talk about it is that studies indicated that there's 9.4 million community dwelling adults that have difficulty completing at least one ADL. And for those of you that don't know, an ADL stands for an activity of daily living. And that includes feeding yourself, getting yourself dressed, bathing, even brushing your teeth. And 12 million reported dependence in at least one ADL or an IADL. An IADL stands for instrumental activity of daily living. And that is all the things beyond your self-care, such as paying a bill, feeding a pet, driving a car. And dependence means that they're requiring someone else to assist them with almost all of the task. So in this study, they found that without supports and home modification, there was a need for increased personal care assistance or the need to move to an institution, which then creates now a new financial burden on the healthcare system, but as well as the family members that are helping the loved one. So the positive outcomes that were identified after doing home modifications included improved functional performance, so the ability to do things that everyone wants to do in their daily life, reduce the risk of falls, and reduce the demands on caregivers. So in another study that was done in 2019, they found that after implementing home modifications, there was a 46% reduction in the need for in-home care. So there was the reduced cost of caregiving and the need of constant supervision by family members, which then allows the family members that are able to return to work outside the home and therefore increase the household income. So they also looked at what are the client's perspectives of having home modifications, because a lot of times people can be hesitant about having someone in their home or changing their home. However, they found in a study done in 2010 that there was increased satisfaction, increased performance, increased independence, which was measured by, it's a standardized test called the Functional Independent Measure, and decreased perception of environmental barriers that influence their activities. So this is a graph that shows the baseline and then post-test, which was completed 3 months after implementing home modifications, and then post-test 2 was done 2 years after implementing home modifications. So while we can see that there is a decrease in A, B, and C from 3 months to 2 years, it still didn't go down as low as it was at the baseline. And then for D, the change in environmental press, those are the viewpoint of the environmental barriers. So they were no longer perceiving the environment as being a barrier to their ability to engage in the activities.
All right, so assisted living cost $5,000 to $6,000 a month. Nursing homes cost around $7,000 a month. And as I've been looking, that seems to be kind of low. Okay, that's the low end. And it also varies, obviously, a lot over what part of the country you're in. But even if you could avoid living in an assisted living, even for a year, that would be a big cost savings and would likely recover some of the home modifications that you've placed or that you've put in place. So every second an older adult falls. 1 in 4 older adults report a fall. Now, as Jane and I have worked in rehab centers for a long time, we can tell you that they don't report the falls. So that number is actually much higher. Or they tell you that it's not really a fall. Like I tripped over my dog and I ended up falling down on my couch, but it wasn't a fall. I just ended up sitting on my couch and I didn't mean to. But the World Health Organization defines a fall as any time you end up on a lower surface inadvertently. So that does in fact count as a fall. Falls are also the #1 cause of hip fractures, and we know that hip fractures are a big cause of debility and not being able to stay in the home and not living the quality of life that you would want to live. So falls are definitely a huge problem. And not only do they cause injury, but in 2015, there was 28,000 deaths related to falls. Nearly 3 million emergency department visits, 850,000 people hospitalized just from falls alone. And just taking a moment to think about the larger impact of it, it obviously impacts your own finances, but Medicare spent $31 billion on falls in 2015. That has not gone down. That number has not gone down. So there's huge implications, and a lot of our money and resources are being spent to treat falls, when maybe it's a better idea to spend it on preventing falls instead. It definitely adds a greater quality of life. So when we talk about a fall risk, I want to clarify, nobody is a zero fall risk. Okay, I was with my daughter and her friends, and we were running around in the mud, and I ended up on the ground because it was slippery. But I wouldn't consider myself a high fall risk. It just sometimes things happen. So when we talk today, we'll talk about the building blocks of fall risk. And the more building blocks you have, the higher your tower is, the more likely that you'd have for a fall. For example, if you get up to go to the bathroom at night and there's no night light, well, that low lighting is one of the blocks of falls. If you need a cane or a walker, but you don't want to grab it because you're sleepy and you just want to do your thing and go back to bed, that's another block of falls. So while we might not be able to eliminate every single fall risk factor, we can decrease some of them. And the lower that tower is, the less likely we are to fall.
So as Rachel was saying, there's going to be risk factors that we have that are not modifiable. It might be something we were born with, or something in our genetics, or a diagnosis we have that's not going to go away. But then there's modifiable risk factors. And so that's where you want to focus, the things that you can change to decrease your risk of falling or decrease your tower. So we divided them into 3 different categories: the environmental, biological, and behavioral. So environmental is going to relate to a lot of the modifications that we're talking about today, like decreasing the clutter in your home or the trip hazards, especially on stairs, lack of stair railing, lack of grab bars in the bathroom, either the shower or near the toilet, and poor lighting, like Rachel has already mentioned. Biological things might be leg weakness or mobility problems or visual deficits or balance deficits. And while some of those are things we might not be able to easily change, there are programs that you can engage in that can help with your leg weakness or improve your mobility or balance. And then even having your vision checked to help with vision deficits you might have. Behavioral risk factors include psychoactive medications, and then taking 4 or more medications at a time, which is called polypharmacy. Engaging in risky behaviors like taking alcohol or other drugs that you might not should be using, especially with certain medications that will have an interaction, or just being inactive in general can increase your risk of falls. And so this part is interactive, so I'm not sure the best way to do it if people want to just chime in the chat or if they're turned on, but just looking at this photo, does anybody want to call out any risk factors they see or anything wrong with this picture? Yeah.
Can you see the chat? You want me to read to you?
I can read it. So I
Okay.
see a vacuum in the middle of the floor. Yeah. An unsteady stand. Yeah. It appears that this person is standing on what almost looks like a swivel stool. So that is definitely not the best way to reach something on top of the cabinets. The vacuum in the way. So some of the other things is even the robe that the person's wearing with the loose ties, that could get stuck in something and cause the person to fall. The vacuum, let's see, even just the setup in general, reaching up overhead is obviously not the best thing to do. We all have to reach things at times, but keep commonly used items at an easy to reach place. Yep, 1 foot not grounded, being barefoot or wearing flip-flops. So we want to wear sensible shoes as well. Just overall, it's not as organized as it could be. So so keeping things more organized, easy to reach, wearing sensible shoes, don't stand on unsteady surfaces. And the other thing is, you can always ask for help too, which I know there might not always be someone around, but if you can plan in advance, like my parents will always want help getting the Christmas tree out of the attic. And so they don't do it alone. They just plan to ask either me or my spouse or my sibling, like, hey, when can you come over and help me get this down? So that they're not doing things that will increase their risk of falls.
So there was a study out not long ago in 2017, I believe, where the American Journal of Preventive Medicine looked at all these things that could prevent falls. And the top 2 might be a little surprising, but the top 2 were vitamin D supplementation and home modifications. Now, vitamin D seems a little odd, but a lack of vitamin D will, it affects your muscle strength indirectly. So it can cause muscle cramping and just muscle weakness. It also serves, vitamin D serves as kind of the car to take calcium to your bone. So you may be taking calcium, but if you don't have the vitamin D to deliver it to your bones, then it doesn't do you as much good as it could. And so that safeguards you if you do have a fall, that your bones are stronger because your vitamin D levels are higher. Now, we don't recommend going out and buying vitamin D supplements and just start popping them right away. But we do recommend next time you're at your doctor to maybe have a conversation about whether you need supplementation, maybe get your vitamin D levels checked so you know what they are. And the other thing was home modifications. So there's a lot of things that we recommend doing, exercises, staying strong and healthy, and all of those are good. But just by modifying your home, you can significantly decrease your falls risk. So this is from the National Council on Aging, and it's 6 steps for preventing falls. And we'll go through each of these steps individually, but they're participating in a balance and exercise program, talking with your healthcare provider, reviewing your medications, getting your hearing and vision checked, having honest conversations with your family members, and also keeping your home safe. So the First thing is find a good balance and exercise program. And I get asked all the time, what is the best exercise to do? And really, what it boils down to, the best exercise is the one you're actually going to do. Because if you hate what you're doing, you're probably not going to keep it up long term. There are some benefits. There's yoga and chair yoga programs. There's Tai Chi that all kind of work on core strengthening and balance. Walking programs are fantastic. They're good not only for your physical health, but your mental health as well. And they have positive effects on your cardiovascular system. A lot of YMCAs have silver sneakers or similar programs that are geared for the aging population. But the main thing is find something that you enjoy so it doesn't feel like a chore, and then you're more likely to stick to it. The next thing is talk to your healthcare provider about your concerns. And I know Jane and I working in rehab see this all the time where everyone will tell their doctor, oh, I'm feeling fine, things are great. But then they come to us and they tell us that things aren't great, or they're in pain, or they've had falls. And we're always like, why did you not bring this up to the doctor when he was here? So make sure, or she was here, make sure you talk to your healthcare provider and also have honest conversations with them. We can help you, but we need to know what's going on with you in order to best serve your interests.
You also need to review your medications. So it's very common for us to have many different doctors involved in our care. We might have a primary care doctor, you might have a cardiologist or a rheumatologist, and everybody's writing different medications for you. So you want to make sure you have a primary care that's looking at all the medications you're being prescribed and making sure there's not any interactions with one another. Many medications also have the side effect of drowsiness or dizziness. So you want to be careful in making sure that that dose is correct for you. Also talk with your healthcare provider on if you could take that medication in the evening versus in the morning, or what's going to work best for you to keep you safe. You also want to talk to them about taking the correct dosage at the correct time. Oftentimes people will read a prescription and misinterpret the directions. So you want to make sure that you're actually taking the correct dose at the correct time. And there are many different options out there to help you with that. And some people prefer a more simple pill box that we've all seen with one slot per day. And then there's more complex pill boxes that will actually send an audible alert to you when it's time to take your medicine, or only open a specific box when it's time to take your medicine. And then also some pharmacies offer the pill packet. So they might have an AM package that has all your medications for the morning and another one for the evening, which can help eliminate the question of, did I take that medication or not? And you don't really know because they're all in the original pill bottle, and it's hard to know how many you would have left from one day to the next. You also want to make sure that you're wearing sensible shoes. So, everybody's going to have a time and a place that they want to wear something nicer. But we want to make sure from day to day that you're wearing a nice supportive shoe, that you're not wearing flip-flops or your toes aren't hanging out the front, and also making sure that you replace your shoes as you should and they're not too worn out so that you have good traction on the bottom to be able to manage your environment. It's also important to talk to your family members and your loved ones about any fears or concerns you have about falling, because they can help you find additional resources, or even help you line up a referral to therapy or find an exercise program that would benefit you. And also you can always talk to family about what kind of things can they help with, or maybe it's even a friend and they're going to be going to the grocery store already, so they can help pick up some extra things for you. Or maybe there's a friend that can help you walk your dog. So just what other resources are out there? If people know that you have concerns, it's better to let them know so that they can help you out. We also want to, keep your home safe. So we've touched on a lot of things, especially in that earlier slide. about what are the different environmental factors you can change. And there's things from widespread changes to very small, low cost, simple modifications that can be made. Some of the main things that we want to think about in keeping your home safe is eliminating the clutter, having your space organized so you're not reaching up really high or reaching down really low. And then looking at your bathroom needs, is there any way to have a 0 entry or a very low threshold walk-in shower? Can you add some grab bars in the shower or a handheld shower head? And then what are your toileting needs? That's another one where a lot of people have very low toilets in their bathrooms and it's not easy to get up and down from them. So could that be exchanged for a higher toilet or just a frame over the toilet to raise the height? And then also always want to think about removing throw rugs because they are easy to trip on when moving from room to room.
So many homes don't have accessible features. Accessible features include extra wide doorways and hallways, step-free entrances. So a ramp or a 0 step entry home. It's even harder to find homes that are wheelchair accessible or homes that have both a bedroom and a bathroom on the first floor that have grab bars and elevated toilet seats like Jane was mentioning. And what we recommend is if you have a home and you don't have, if you can pick one to have the bathroom, have a full bath on the first floor, because in the event of an injury, you can make other rooms a bedroom for the short term. But if you don't have a bathroom on the first floor, that ends up being much more problematic. So aging in place is not only about improving your quality of life, but it might be about making your home more visitable to others. That's a hard word to say. So maybe your mobility is fine, but your aunt likes to come visit. So what might her needs be? And are there simple ways that you can make your home more accessible to others that want to come see you?
And I know I've already touched on this a little bit, but rugs cause slips and trips. I mean, that's something that we hear about over and over again. And I know it's common for a lot of people to have that rug when they first walk into the home or right outside the home to clean your feet. So, not saying that you have to get rid of every rug in your house, but maybe eliminate the unnecessary rugs in the home or consider tacking down the edges so that, you're not shuffling your feet, which is common as we get older, and then hitting the side of your foot on the rug, which can cause a slip or a trip or fall. And pets also can cause the slips and trips. So, I don't have room to talk because I have 3 dogs and they have definitely knocked me down before as well. But, maybe investing in additional training for your pets, or is there somebody who can take the dog for the longer walk each day? Can you hire somebody so that they're less likely to be excited and jump on you? Or if you're just returning from the hospital, could a family member put the animal in another room until you can get settled? So just being aware of the other things in the home that can cause additional problems.
There's some low or no cost home modifications. We want to always allow, or whenever you can, allow for natural light. Again, remove clutter just by clearing your walkways so that there's not things on the ground to trip on. Makes a huge difference. Make sure your cords are away from walkways. Remove the throw rugs, as Jane said. And another thing that you might not think about is to set the water heater so it's less than 120 degrees so that you don't end up with scalding injuries from the shower, especially if you have skin issues where you don't feel things as well due to diabetes or some spinal issues. And here's the question, do the walkers and canes prevent falls? And the research, quite frankly, hasn't been real conclusive about whether or not they prevent falls. But what we see all the time is people just go pick up a cane they don't really know how to use it. They don't know how to sequence it. They'll hold it on the wrong side of their body, or it'll be too high or too low. And same thing with a walker. Someone will just decide, hey, I need a walker. I'm going to go get one. Well, why do you need a walker? And is the walker set for your height? So having a conversation with a physical therapist or an occupational therapist about what devices might help you, not just canes and walkers, but things you can use in the bathroom as well, will help with that. Also, we find that a lot of times people with devices like a walker or cane fall, but they're not using the walker or cane when they fall. So it's not going to help you prevent a fall if you leave it over in the corner and out of reach. So remember, if you do have a walker or cane, keep it with you at all times.
So these are just the overall services that we offer through Designing Independence. So we will look at what medical equipment you might need and can help you find resources to obtain that. Adaptations for energy conservation. So that is more thinking about your daily routine and the things that are the priorities for each day, and then thinking of ways to conserve your energy so that you're able to accomplish your goals. We also look at medication adherence strategies. So as we were talking earlier about the different type of pill boxes available, we do pre and post surgery consultations, aging in place consultations, seminars, and workplace ergonomic assessments.
We do have a book out that has all the tips we gave you today and more. There's one tip on each page, so it's a rather thick book, but that way you can write notes on each page as you go along, so it can be kind of a journal for you as well. So if you'd like to learn more, you can check out our book, and in just a minute, I can put that in the chat for you if you'd like.
And if you have any specific questions for us at another time that come up, you can always go to our website and you can contact us through that as well.
Yep.
Sorry, those are just our references from the articles that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation.
And that's it. That concludes our presentation. Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Rachel Blackwood and Jane Sizemore. Now it's time for Q&A, questions and answers. So please type any questions you have for the presenters here in the chat as they're speaking and answering other questions, or just as they come up. We have some questions that people sent in previously. One is from a couple in their 70s in South Florida that want to age out in their home. And even though they find that their setup is great and that they have a guest house if they need help, they think that the main house may need some alterations. Do you have a list of resources or individuals that they can consult on how to make the home age in ready or make structural changes if needed?
So as he was introducing us, he mentioned some of the different certifications that Rachel and I have. And so one of the best things to do would be to go to the websites for these certifications and find a directory. And I will include those in the chat box in just a moment. But one of them is a certified aging in place specialist. Another one is homemods.org, and that is all the people that have completed the home modification certification training through University of Southern California. And then there's another group called HOMODA, which is all occupational therapists nationwide that work in home modification. So I'm going to add those down here in the chat as well.
Okay. We received another question in the chat. Do you know if Medicare or Medicaid pay for home modifications, such as modification of a walk-in shower?
Medicare does not. I think on occasion Medicaid will, you've got to jump through some hoops to get it. Same thing with the VA. Sometimes they will too, but it's not an easy process to do.
Overall, in terms of funding, which I know can be a big factor for a lot of people, there's a lot of individual grant programs that I would look into. So if you have a specific diagnosis, like for example, Parkinson's, you can go to like a Parkinson's association, and sometimes you can find grants or funding for resources to do home modifications through those type of agencies. And then also look at like for us, it's called the Area Council on Aging. Some of them will offer different modification programs as well, which are at times they are diagnosis based, and other times they are financial based as well.
Mhm. Yeah, in New York City, it's DFTA, Department for the Aging.
Okay.
And we had another question. Can you recommend how to open up the conversation with family members, especially members who may be oblivious to the elder family's needs?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are you asking more specifically to have the conversation with the older person who might need the modifications, or with, like, for instance, me talking to a sibling that might be unaware of my parents' needs?
Let's see. She
With
said,
both.
okay.
So there are different tactics, and it's hard to give a specific answer because everybody's personality is different, and the way that conversations need to go with different types of personalities. I can't state what would be best for each thing, but there's something called the CODA Alliance. And so they make cards called the Go Wish cards, and they specifically talk about death and how somebody views death and what their wishes are for how they want to live out their years. And it starts those difficult conversations that a lot of people don't want to have. And so maybe that's not the specific route to go, but just thinking about like conversation starter topics in general that might be able to help lead you in that direction of it being able to express your concerns, and that, the reason you're having the conversation is that you love them and you care about them and you want what's best for them long term.
Sometimes even saying, I'm trying to make your life easier for you, versus, hey, you're getting older and I'm worried about you, goes better. Like, Mom, I see you're having trouble getting into the house. What if we just put a ramp up so that you don't have to, so that's not a problem, just to make your life easier. Some people are more open to that versus like, hey, you need a ramp because you're getting older and you're going to fall. And they don't want to look at that. They don't want to look at aging, but they might look at a way to make their life just more simple.
And I think too, just maintaining that team approach of we're in this together, this is a joint decision, or even offering choices. Like, would you rather choose this style of shower chair or this shower? So they're still in control and feel like they're able to, match the finishes in their bathroom already, or choose what they find more aesthetically pleasing, can be helpful as well.
I know some people have trouble with the doorknobs, and I just put one of those bar type of handles in. I just installed it, and my parents just said, thank you so much for doing that. I just went and did it. I didn't have a conversation. Usually if I have a conversation with them and I ask them if they want something, they'll say no. So
it's something like that is actually a really good first step, because it's not a large change. It's not something that costs anybody a lot of money, but it is just a simple change that makes life easier. And that might be a way you can kind of take them down the road. Like, hey, remember while we changed out that doorknob and it made things easier? Like, let's do this to make things easier, So
yeah. We have a question. Can you put in a stair lift which does not block the stairway for other people? I wonder
You can.
If exists. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
You can. They have stair lifts that the chair will like fold up in half. so that it's out of the way when other people are trying to get up and down the stairs. I do caution with stair lifts. If you have like a progressive neurological disease, they're not always the best choice because of posture issues that might happen. People with ALS, Huntington's, Parkinson's often lose control of posture. Sometimes people after a stroke will, and it makes it hard to sit on a chair, and you don't want to fall out of a chair as it's going up the stairs. So I do recommend having somebody, a physical therapist, occupational therapist, somebody who knows home modifications, to look at not only your house and see if it's feasible, but also see if it's feasible for the person that you're using the stair lift for.
Can a person live in place who has mobility issues that cause difficulty walking without a walker or wheelchair, or if they're unable to use their hands, so they're unable to tie their shoes or cook?
So yes and no. I mean, I think the hardest thing to say is that you have to leave your home. So there's always options to modify things and to make things easier, or to hire additional help, whether that's a family member or a spouse that's able to take on the things that that person can't, or, you know, private pay to supplement the things that the person can't do. I mean, you can get by living at home forever if you're willing to compromise on things and to pay for the things you can't do. But, you know, to more specifically answer your question, in terms of like fine motor and hand grip strength, there's a lot of modifications out there, you know, from electric can openers to, you know, plate guards to like cuff that goes on your whole hand to hold your utensils, so you no longer have to grasp the utensil. So there's always different ways of thinking of things and different ways of modifying that you could potentially make it work. I think one of the biggest concerns with staying in the home is, what is your cognitive status? You know, obviously we don't want you leaving the burners on or leaving the water running, like those kinds of things. So I know it's not a direct answer, but.
It's also more easy to stay if you're using a walker versus a wheelchair. To make things wheelchair accessible takes a lot of money. And it may not, at some point you get to a financial point where, is it worth me putting this much money into my home versus finding a place that is set up for wheelchair access, where to get walker or cane access is not, it's an easier thing to accomplish.
Right. And if you're in a wheelchair temporarily or for distances, you know, that's easier than if you are 100% confined to a wheelchair, because at that point you need countertops in the bathroom, in the kitchen, everything that allows your wheelchair to roll underneath it. Whereas if you are able to stand some, you can always roll your chair up, you know, to a counter and then stand at the sink to wash your hands or wash dishes. So there's a lot of individual thought process to think about. So it's not really a one size fits all answer.
Okay, and we just received a question in the chat. Is there one place, like one website, that has all the stuff that makes life easier for aging, like the hand gloves you just described?
We have a lot on our website.
Yeah, there's a lot on our website, and then there's different catalogs I know that get sent out that have a lot of these kind of adaptive equipment is what I'm referring to. So we can, let's see if we can add a link to our website, and then I'll see if I can find anything else as well while we're talking.
Great. Thank you. Some people have those home assistant devices like Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa. There might be others. And we heard that Amazon Alexa has some kind of an alert mechanism for an adult who fell that will alert family members and maybe call emergency numbers. I'm not sure. Do you have any information about that?
Yeah, so I looked up this program. It's called Alexa Together is what it's called. And it is relatively new, and it is in works of improvement. with some new updates supposed to be coming out this year, which includes allowing more than one family member to be involved. Right now, it's a two-person kind of thing. So like if I were the caregiver, I could drop in on my mom and call her or video call her and see what she's up to. I can also go on an app on my phone and send alerts like time to take your medicine, or, don't forget it's trash day, like that kind of thing. So with that, let's see, it does require you to have one of their compatible fall detection devices, which I am not familiar with either of these two that they list. So it's Vayar or Sky Angel Care. So it'll detect the fall, and then Amazon Alexa asks if they need help. And at that point, they can then call 911 and any emergency contacts. So it's not foolproof at this point. I wish that it offered more devices that could be compatible with it, because I think that would make it a little bit more appealing. But I imagine that maybe that's coming in the future, since they're already making plans to add on other features to it. So it's a good option. There's also, smartwatches that have fall detection in them as well. And those can call 911 or emergency contacts. So there's different options out there. Another one that we've used or talked about a good bit is called Home Accept. And so while that's not necessarily a fall detection program, it is a program that has movement sensors. So you have so many sensors that you can place in strategic areas around the home, and they're connected to a caregiver or a loved one. And it lets that person know, like, hey, this person's gotten out of bed, or they sat in their recliner at this time, or they opened the refrigerator. So it's kind of a way to remotely monitor a loved one without having cameras in place, but you can just monitor their activity through these sensors, which is another option for people as well.
So they won't feel like their privacy is being invaded.
Right. And that is kind of what I've gathered from the Alexa together, is that it seems to be, unless I'm interpreting it wrong, but it seems to be that you can kind of video in whenever you want. Now, I imagine the loved one has some sort of settings to maybe block that from happening at any time, but I'm not entirely sure. And then obviously there's camera systems that some people just have in their homes for security, that you can also use for remote monitoring, but it's a little bit more intrusive than just some little tiny sensors placed somewhere that are not watching you, so.
And with the Amazon Alexa, you have to have people everyone needs to be comfortable with, using like smart home technology and be comfortable with it in their home. And not everyone is there yet, right? So I think it's great for some people, but it's not going to work for everyone.
Right.
Yeah. Might only be good for finding out the weather. Anyway.
Right.
Then what kind of arrangements can be made for, might be a dumb question, but for keys? Should you just give the keys to, specific relatives? Should you have a hiding place for the keys, for like a neighbor nearby that's trusted to get in? Is there anything about, keys, distributing keys that for help?
I really like having the door keypad option for people that have multiple people that need to come in or might need to access the house. Having the electronic key option.
It allows you to change the code too. If there's somebody who you don't necessarily want to have the code anymore to get into the home. We have one on our garage, and it's great because I don't even carry house keys with me anymore, because it's just, I come in through the garage and punch the code in and go. Another idea that I like is, at least I refer to it as like the realtor kind of lockbox thing, where you can place a key inside of a box, and then that person has to have the code to get the key out. So that's a little bit of an easier choice if you didn't want to change your actual locks on your door. But I would use discretion when giving out an actual key to somebody. But at the same time, I think it's important for somebody that you know and love and trust to have access to your home, because if they're worried about you and they can't get a hold of you, somebody needs to get in there without having to break your door down, because then you have more problems.
Right.
True. Yeah. At what point would you say aging in place is not an option?
I think a lot of that comes down to finances, because as Jane alluded to, you can make any home 100% accessible, but at some point it doesn't make sense to spend that amount of money on the home. And if you have to pay for round the clock care, that's, a lot of times that's $20 an hour, $25 an hour, $30 an hour, depending on where you live. And that adds up really quickly. Like, you really have to want to live in your home to have to spend up that kind of money. I think most people can live in their home for a long time, but those last couple of years, it is much harder without spending a lot of money to make things like totally accessible.
Right. Or, considering if you have a diagnosis that's rapidly progressive and you're going to have different needs that are going to change very quickly over time, I think that would be another time to consider, is this the best thing to do financially, as well as for my loved ones that are here with me, constantly having to redo things and change things. And then also, I know I mentioned earlier, but I think there also kind of comes a point cognitively, if you're putting yourself in danger or your other family members in danger because of your cognitive status, that might be a time to consider alternative options as well. And then if, another time would just be if you're falling constantly, maybe at that point, you're kind of limited. Are you going to install an overhead chair or like lift system to move from one room to the other, because that's the only option? Or is it time to consider moving on? But again, it's a personal decision, whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever your finances can provide, whatever your loved ones want to do, you can make things work for sure.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience have a question they'd like to type into the chat? I think we've answered everything we've received so far. Or if you want further clarification on a question you had asked previously. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jane Sizemore and Rachel Blackwood.